As the president of the Center for National Software Studies from 2005 to 2008, I pioneered the development and promotion of the maturity framework for assuring resiliency under stress. I've been pressing the issue of resiliency in the critical infrastructure in various venues, including National Software Strategy Group, Council on Competitiveness, National Science Foundation, Department of Commerce, National Institute for Science and Technology, Department of Homeland Security, Homeland Security Information Network Advisory Committee, Information Technology Information Sharing Advisory Committee, House Committee on Homeland Security. While there is curiosity and intrigue surrounding the issue of resilience, and some have even claimed to have achieved it, there is not yet a commitment to adopting the means, capability, and capacity to achieve it throughout the critical infrastructure. The obstacles and barriers to adoption range from agreeing on the definition of resiliency to the scope of the framework for assuring resiliency under stress, and to the public policy measures needed to foster its adoption throughout the critical infrastructure and defense industrial base. The critical infrastructure is the industrial base on which the competitiveness and security of the nation are dependent. The current state of the nation's critical infrastructure is at risk. Following a summary opening in this video, I will discuss in subsequent videos the challenges of the critical infrastructure, the dimensions of resiliency, a maturity framework for assuring resiliency under stress, how public policy measures can assist deployment, and what outcomes can be expected by adopting the strategies and tactics outlined here. The Internet has become the central nervous system of the nation, both private and public. It is controlled and driven by systems of systems and their underlying complex, large-scale, real-time software systems. The nation's critical infrastructure continues to be vulnerable to natural disasters and cascading cybersecurity attacks. Many industry sectors continue to stand naked to the wind. Private industry controls 80 to 85% of the critical infrastructure. Consequently, private industry must adopt resilience as an essential ingredient of competitiveness with the expectation of boosting brand value. The critical infrastructure protection model is insufficient. In addition to CIP, a critical infrastructure resilience model needs to be adopted. We need to move from static lock and chain protection beyond the combination lock to the strategy of a chessboard with moving parts capable of anticipating, avoiding, minimizing, withstanding, and recovering from the effects of threats and vulnerabilities. We need to shift the locus of control for the nation's cybersecurity from protection to resilience. Achieving resiliency within the critical infrastructure through public-private partnerships is insufficient. Following 9/11, the first stage approach to protecting the nation's critical infrastructure was unilateral mandated action. This has given way to a second stage consensus approach achieved through public-private partnerships organized around industry sectors. There is now a concern that the effectiveness of this approach is limited, as those involved in assuring the protection have adopted a go-along, get-along posture and are drifting towards complacency. While this approach may be effective in addressing the needs within an industry sector stovepipe, it is proving ineffective in addressing the needs that cross-cut industry sectors. It is time to consider a third stage approach to better address the cross-cutting issues, one based on incentives facilitated through public policy measures and perhaps some regulation. Connect the dots, permitting the industry sectors of the critical infrastructure to focus only on protection and not resilience, is facilitated by public-private partnerships that don't cope with cross-cutting issues. A concerted action program is needed to overcome these problems and break out of the current state. Measuring maturity in the assurance of resiliency would impact the nation's critical infrastructure by accelerating the paradigm shift from critical infrastructure protection to critical infrastructure resilience. A resiliency maturity framework would drive the business case and enterprise commitment towards the assurance of software security, business continuity, system survivability, and system of systems resiliency. The deployment challenge is to get the gears to engage. Deployment of the maturity framework would be accelerated by selecting the right mix of public policy measures from among market-driven tactics, self-help remedies, targeted investment, insurance mechanisms, import tariffs, tax policy, guiding regulations, and targeted legislation. The right mix would accord as much self-determination as possible and invoke as little regulation as necessary. Balancing the duality of market-driven incentives and regulatory measures is a challenge, one that requires a high degree of sophistication. The result would improve security and competitiveness. The enterprise that achieves resilience will boost its reputation and enhance the value of its brand. Being resilient pays direct dividends to competitiveness. The resiliency of the nation's critical infrastructure is not simply an issue of homeland security. It is an issue of national defense. The health and status of the private sector, and even its behavior, have long been connected with national preparedness. The National Defense University was established half a century ago by President Eisenhower to ensure that the industrial base was capable of meeting national security and defense needs, as well as the competitiveness needs of the country. Achieving maturity and the assurance of resiliency within the critical infrastructure will help safeguard the nation and advance its global competitiveness. This is a wake-up call.